you're the one who came up with the genius idea. You want to get us started? Tell us a little bit about yourself and where we find you.
My name is Alfred Burgesson. I'm in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I'm here with my good friend and co-host Tristan Oliff.
Yeah. I honestly wouldn't have given it a go at your last name. Burgesson? Alfred Burgesson?
Yeah, you got it.
Cool.
You got it.
Nice to see you, Alfred.
Good to see you, man. So yeah, I hit you up probably like a month ago or under a month ago, and I said we should start a podcast, or I can't even remember what I said, but we can find it and we can put it here in the video. But yeah, I hit you up because you're doing some cool work, and I think I'm doing some cool work, and I think we're both reaching a large audience, and primarily young people who are interested in sort of speaking up and having a voice and advocating for change. And so, you're doing yours through an online digital way, and you'll explain more about it, and so am I. But I thought perhaps we could do something that would be, capturing people's attention through audio, perhaps even through video. And again, I think through storytelling and through, youth having a voice on this podcast, I think we can uncover some stories and cover some injustices and cover some areas for change in Canada, honestly. And I would hope that, with the platform that you have and the platform that I have, I think we can find a way to combine efforts, and after people listen to what we have to say, they can go online to take action somewhere.
Cool, man. Solidarity.
We both have audiences, and we can bring the conversations or the topics that they care about onto our podcast, and we can sort of have a cycle where they go back online to take action on things that that we discuss on here, and we bring on guests to talk about issues that our generation cares about and is worried about and wants to see change with. So what are your thoughts when what kind of podcast would you want to be a co-host of, Tristan?
I believe very strongly in the importance of storytelling and awareness around important issues. I think that they are in this age that we live in, this socialized, digitalized internet era, where communication and online discussion is the norm. Making sure that young people are represented is super important, and and I think, like you said, using the platforms and the audiences that we all have, and making sure that just taking it as a responsibility to help those people be in touch with cool ideas and important an important action. So podcast is a great medium to do it. So I'm not coming in with a lot of expectations. I think that I'm definitely, in my line of work, at least right now, it's very much engaged in the news, and I guess I'll talk about that in a little bit. I think that there's a part of me that maybe wants to keep this more holistic and less less news based on sort of the beat. So that's sort of my idea, and I'm just looking forward to this as an opportunity to discuss and talk and share.
Awesome. Yeah. So you're coming in this with little to no expectation, and I'm coming in this saying this is going to be a number one podcast in the world at some point. Okay.
That's great. That's perfect.
No, seriously though, like how many of the podcasts that are on the top 100 on Apple have two young people under 30 hosting them? Like, and when you think about like where we are,
not enough.
Exactly, not enough. And I think, when you think about where we are in the world right now, young people are the ones who are speaking up loudest about issues, but yet get little to no time on whether it's traditional media, like, get little to no time on television, And again, I think if you look at the top 100 podcasts, if you think about who are the, you know, who's hosting these podcasts, I don't think we have a lot of people in our age demographic. Like I'm a Gen Z. Okay.
You got big energy, man, and you want to direct it. You want to direct it towards good causes, and sometimes it means volunteering in the community. Sometimes it means, being an entrepreneur, starting a business that can grow and that can develop and that can have utility and financial stability. And sometimes it's just using your voice, as a medium to sharing, positive ideas. And I think, the important sort of buzzwords that I think about are, our perspective, representation, and just representing different points of views. And I think that's the main part of it. But I think, we're sort of dancing around, some of the topics of like, who are we, what do we do, and why do we feel like we have an authority to talk on issues on a podcast, and why do we feel like we can make the biggest podcast in the world? Now, I have had the pleasure of actually interviewing you. So, I feel like I know a decent amount, but, I would love to hear it again. So, why don't you just take the opportunity to talk a little bit about sort of what you do and how that relates to this idea, at least right now, of a new action podcast.
I started my own business a few years ago, and it was a youth-led sort of consultancy business. We wanted to employ youth. We wanted to give youth opportunities to lead community engagement events, and for youth to be involved in conversations that were happening in our city and in our province, really. And since then, I've been engaged with youth work at the city level, at the provincial level, at the federal level. And last year I joined the Prime Minister's Youth Council. And on the council, we have the chance to talk to the Prime Minister, other ministers. By far the best part of being on the council is my peers, like the other young people across Canada. By far, that's, I would say that's the best part of it, is being able to have conversations with my peers and, not all be on the same page, but yet continue to move together and continue to sort of empathize and listen and learn. I think there's a lot of power in like circles like that. 'Cause like, while we have such, great access to the Prime Minister and ministers, like there's really a lot of the power of a circle like that, and the learning that happens in a circle like that has been incredible. In terms of what led me to, reaching out to you to do something like this podcast, it started when the Youth Council wrote a letter to the Prime Minister and had some recommendations in it. And we wanted him to take action on systemic racism in Canada. And we didn't, I don't think we got a response, but we didn't get action from that response. And so we thought, I thought, what better way to get action out of our Prime Minister and other elected officials than having, citizens who are not on the Youth Council, but citizens within their districts and jurisdictions, send them an email to say they demand them to take action on systemic racism. And so you can make custom campaigns through New Mode, and I created one for the anti-racism letter we wrote to the Prime Minister. And from there, I saw, more than 1,000 people take action and add their voice to our letter, and pretty much, say that they believed in the things we were demanding for. And so, I think there's power in elected officials hearing from their constituents, and there's power in young people demanding change. And so I think the tool that was created has definitely empowered a lot of voices. And so since then, we've launched a few more campaigns. We've launched one with you and the good folks at Nouvelle. So, so I think we want to focus on campaigns that are national in scope, localized campaigns as well. And we want to, create many, campaigns that allow citizens and specifically young people to demand the change that they seek. And so I think, again, this podcast is another way in which we can discuss some of the issues that are currently taking place in our world in Canada, and perhaps a way we can direct people again to take action online.
Yeah, and brainstorm, and brainstorm. And I think that was one of the things that I sort of mentioned in sort of my opening monologue is that so often some of the best ideas that I think I have often just come through conversation, conversation with others. And especially, right now it's in our first episode, and God knows, how many people will listen and watch and think about it. And I think, obviously the goal is to grow and grow over time. And the more we grow, the more people will probably go all the way back and be like, oh, wow, this is so cool. I want to go listen to the first episode and see what they were like when they had no idea what they were talking about. And, and hopefully they'll be like, oh, you know what, they did a good job.
Yeah.
But, but to go back to a little bit of, that story, I think that really what it, sort of just your journey into developing the project that, I think is sort of centered to this collaborative effort right now, which is your work in creating collective action.ca, obviously, and trying to, operationalize, action, towards specific goals. And I thought that, your example of sending a letter to the Prime Minister, I thought was it's an interesting exploration into the idea of how people in power, sort of react to, to sort of public outcries for change, for action, for condemnation. Depends what it is. And I thought that the way that those responses take place can kind of be sort of separated into two separate parts, one of which being reaction and the other one being action. And I thought that was an interesting part because, oftentimes you see a very public, campaign. And, I think this sort of is centered around the discussion of doing more to tackle systemic racism. And of course, that was like the subject of this particular letter that was co-authored by you and some of the other members of the Youth Council. But, thinking about, for example, the Prime Minister himself being at the rally, the March for Black Lives Matter, and in memory of, of course, of George Floyd, that really, set off a string of protests and calls for action, both in the US and subsequently in Canada. And thinking about this idea of reaction versus action, and reaction in this case being, for example, the Prime Minister joining the march, very publicly and standing and also subsequently kneeling, on Parliament Hill in solidarity with the marches, which is a very public symbol of reaction. But I think that it's really important that that be sort of contrasted to actual concrete action, and steps that can be taken. And I think that, at least from the lens that I look at things, and sort of the political lens, and the way that, one can sometimes conflate, messaging with sort of action. It's I guess it's an important thing. And I think that that's one of the important aspects of what collective action does, which is, it encourages people to just, to send a list of demands to specific leaders. And what that does is it doesn't just sort of leave some ambiguity in terms of how they can react to what you're demanding for. It lists very specific actions that are being demanded, and therefore create a system of accountability, right, where you can say you either did or didn't do what was demanded through, right, this collective action. And I think that's an important distinction.
I think stories play a huge role in that, right? And stories bring light to perspectives that may be unknown, or perspectives that, things that we may all think but haven't had a chance to articulate. And so with that, I've been a huge fan of Nouvelle since day one. Can you share a little bit more about Nouvelle and where the idea came from and where you're going right now with it and how it essentially how it works? What is Nouvelle?
Yeah, 100%. So, from the outset, Nouvelle is an independent, youth-driven, and frankly, youth-focused news organization that I launched and have been running for the past couple months, based here in Canada. And among other things, the real focus is both trying to promote youth voices in Canada, encourage young people to share their stories and share their perspectives. But also as an organization, the goal is also to help engage and involve young people in stories that matter and the news. And I think that the best way to kind of think about it, at least in the way that I think about this idea of the news, which is this incredible microcosm of information flows, and it is hugely subjective. Some people get all their news from Twitter, some people get it from Facebook, from YouTube, some people subscribe to the newspapers. But importantly, that shapes the way that you understand what is going on around you. And
What form? Sorry to cut you off, Tristan. What
yeah,
format is Nouvelle in? Where do your stories get posted, and how do
yeah.
people engage with Nouvelle?
Right. So, I mean, right now it is, it's a website. It's the hub is nouvelle.news. And in the format right now, it's an amalgamation of stories of news written by young people that tries to include their perspectives. Our journalists who go out and report try to frame their articles in a way that really focuses on what are the takeaways that young people should take from it. And also, of course, we exist on multiple mediums of Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and expanding. But the main goal is to make sure that the stories that matter, the stories that can really shape people's understanding of events that are affecting them, and engage them in the conversation. Our goal is to try to make those stories as easily consumable as possible. And I think that's that's something really important. I think that just to sort of like put a cap on this little summary of the project that I've been working on. News, it doesn't only shape what people understand, it also shapes the public discussion. Oftentimes a protest of hundreds of young people, for example, let me talk about a protest I've attended in the past here in Ontario discussing the elimination of free tuition for low-income university students. I attended protests with hundreds of young people, and those protests would be characterized as or demonstrations rather would be characterized as outliers, and they would lack importance, and the provincial government here, the Ford government, probably wouldn't have taken any notice. Having said that, a scathing op-ed written by the editorial team of the Toronto Star or the National Post, likely just one person or a group of people writing a scathing op-ed of the government's undertaking of education reform in Ontario would most likely lead to a wealth of reaction and potential action by the government, despite the fact that it might not necessarily reflect the opinions of the people who are directly impacted. And so I take this example as a means to say that in the contemporary sort of news ecosphere, there is a distinct lack of representation of young people and their perspectives. And what that does is that it often gives this perception, especially amongst the power and decision makers in the country and in the provinces, that young people don't necessarily matter as much as other groups. And so, at its most basic form, Nouvelle is an attempt, at least, to try and help amplify the perspectives and the opinions and the importance of young people and their ability to help shape a more equitable future.
That's awesome, man. I think that is so important, and I'm sure it hasn't been easy since you started this, but like in watching what you've been doing, man, I think it's so needed in our world today. So kudos to you for doing this work. And I think actually what's special about Nouvelle and Collective Action that I've noticed is the fact that, you know, while we have websites and sort of web platforms that we're directing traffic to, a lot of that traffic stems from social media. And so I think, you know, when I think about your Instagram feed and, you know, how easy it is to consume information from your Instagram feed, and how that can lead to not only someone reading a full article or some of the article, but also taking action. I think that's really powerful. And again, the fact that we are two young people, you know, doing this work and using social media as our way of gathering an audience, and to grow in the sense of like being aware of what's happening, but again, also being able to like take action on the things that you're taking in.
Yeah. I appreciate that a lot, and I think, yeah, you know, it's all about at the end of the day, it's all about initiative, and you know, we you know, we only have one planet, we only have one life, and we live day to day at a time, and yeah, you know, it just sort of comes up to you know, how do you think that you can most effectively use your energy to drive what you believe in? And I think that you know, thankfully there are a lot of people like you and I that take a, you know, a collective approach, that think about the sum of all parts and not just the individual cog. Yeah, and you know, and I think that it's you know, I think, well, honestly, what I really think is we should talk a little bit about you know, who we not who we are. We've already talked about that, but how we know each other and whatnot, because it is a random pairing. But I think that a good segue to think about it also is just sort of like the sense of value to a certain extent that you know, we believe our projects are creating. And I think it's interesting that although we are two people who have a sort of entrepreneurial mindset, we're also two people who are talking about projects that don't necessarily, at least, you know, right now, aren't prioritizing monetary value, but rather trying to sort of just amplify you know, sort of social value. But you know, but taking an entrepreneurial mindset to that, and I think that's super you know, it's very interesting. I think it hopefully is a big aspect of why we can make these kinds of projects succeed. But to sort of draw back to that question I sort of asked us, so I think, you know, I think we tried to track this down once upon a time. We met, I believe it was 3 years ago. Was it 3 years ago?
Yeah, about 3 years ago.
In Ottawa. And I think what was interesting when I was reflecting about this sort of question that we'd set ourselves before the podcast, it was fun that what both drew us to, funnily enough, being in Parliament, in I believe it's like the Queen Victoria Hall or something like that, something very pompous and royal and regal. Yeah. But what I found interesting was that what brought us to this very political place was very much entrepreneurial mindsets, and but for totally different reasons. And so the scene was, well, I think it's important you set the scene, mostly because I don't think I could exactly remember what it was. But so what was the you were attending the conference? Well,
you were capturing the scene.
Well, in that case, you were the scene. So, but to sort of paint the picture, tell us a little bit about the conference that was going on, and what you were doing there, and then I can talk a little bit about what I was doing there.
While I was in Enactus, Connect Ed was a social enterprise that was developed, and someone mentioned active citizens. I don't know if I can remember the full name of the of the conference, but I remember it was the Active Citizens UN program.
Yeah, co-hosted by British Council and the United Nations. What is it? The United Nations
Association of
Association in
Canada.
Canada. I should know because they cut me all the checks.
Uh,
But
yeah.
okay, so I didn't know that background there. Okay, so
Yeah.
it was
So
from Enactus that you were drawn to Active Citizens.
yeah. So I was a part of the connected team and sort of was leading that connected project with Enactus, and just someone sent me sort of the application for Active Citizen. So I applied. I remember putting in my goofy video, and now it's everywhere. When someone searches Alfred Burgesson, the goofy video from me in my college home 3 years ago comes up on the British Council website.
Nice. And what was the project that you're working on and that you presented at this Active Citizens conference?
So ConnectEd was essentially teaching underrepresented and marginalized youth sort of skills when it comes to technology. So giving them access to technology, but then also training them and developing their skills with technology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And so yeah, I remember coming to Ottawa, and at the Active Citizens Conference, there were youth from all across Canada who applied and got into this program, and we had a day full of sort of meeting with folks across from Canada and the world in the social enterprise space who were sitting with us in little workshops and reviewing our ideas and helping us refine our pitches. And then at the end of the day, we all had our pitches, and there was, I think, 3 winners. There might've been 3 winners. I wasn't a winner. But I remember the experience was incredible. And again, I think, looking back at that, like the people who I met and the people who I got to spend time with was by far the best and most rewarding part of that trip. But I remember, I don't know if we spoke when we were in sort of the Parliament area, but I think when we went to the British ambassador's home.
Yeah, over a glass of wine or something like that.
Yeah.
All right. No, but okay. Before you get to that, let me talk a little bit about what I was doing there.
Okay.
Because I was there for totally different reasons. I was actually the official photographer for the event, and it was actually my second year being the photographer, and I think I've got to give an appropriate shout out here to my very dear friend Adil Scali. Who was the organizer of the Active Citizens event. Actually, he was the organizer the year before. The year that you were there with the organizer was another good friend called Gina. And basically I to go back a little bit on a tangent, I had been studying at Carleton University in Ottawa, studying political science and African studies, and I had gotten very into photography. At the end of my first year, I went on this amazing trip to Peru, and I decided to make a splash purchase. I always loved taking photos on my phone, and I decided to go and buy myself this cheap little Nikon camera and a stock lens, and took it with me on this amazing backpacking trip to Peru, where if you or anyone listening has been to Peru knows exactly why you'd fall in love with photography there, but one of the most naturally diverse countries in the world. And so when I came back from there, I continued to take photos and slowly post them on Instagram and gaining a bit of a following, and then slowly getting people to ask me to take their headshots and cover their events. And of course, for a while I was always let me please do it for free. I don't trust myself enough. And then this friend of mine, Adil, came to me and he said, we need a photographer to do this event, and our budget is extremely limited. So can you help us out? And so, and this was actually,
was that your first professional gig?
No, it was not. It was the second, that was so the Active Citizens Conference the year before you were there was my first gig.
Wow.
And, from a critical photographic standpoint, it was an absolute disaster. Because I was still using my cheap Nikon, and and the stock lens, and I was in Parliament where, it's, a building that was rebuilt in the 1920s. So the lighting is horrible and everything's brown and gray and, oh God. And the pictures just, I mean, they were manageable, but they weren't great. But luckily and thankfully, the year after that, I was called to come again. I was called and asked if my photos would be substantially better. And I assured them that I'd bought a new camera and I'd done more gigs and I would do a great job and I would again be very aggressively cheap. So I had a chance to go do it again. And I remember, going out and renting some really nice lenses, and I'm getting a little bit off the point, but it was a very proud moment, going back there a year later and taking photos, which I felt were, very much professional grade. And I know that because they continue to appear in a lot of the promotional material for the conference and the British Council and the United Nations Association in Canada. But all long-winded to say, back in Parliament, and it was one of the funner parts of developing my own photography business, and specializing in conference and event photography was often the inspirational nature of the events that I was covering, and being a young university student, with a budding entrepreneurial mindset and a background in political science, to be in Parliament, listening and taking photos to all these very inspirational young professionals around the country, and hearing how they had developed their own social enterprises, finding innovative ways to create, solutions to social problems, but finding a way for them to be, or looking to find a way for those solutions to be equitable and self-sustainable. It was very inspiring, and but also came with some fun perks. And as Alfred mentioned, one of those was every year going to the High Commissioner's house of the British High Commissioner, whose name is Susan de Grand Langholm or something like that, who I've photographed at about 15 different events. She's definitely a socialite in Ottawa. I don't think she likes me. But probably because when I went to this event and took photos of Alfred and his group co-hosts, I did not a lot of photo talking and a lot of wine drinking with all the participants, and a lot of schmoozing and connection building. And one of those connections that I was able to make and share was with Alfred, where I think I approached you by saying, "Hey, I heard your speech. You did really great. You really remind me of this YouTuber I really like. Have you heard of him?"
Yes, and that was Marquez. Was that Marquez Brownlee?
Yeah, and
that was, yeah. Wow, that's so funny that you remember that.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So that's kind of where the timelines kind of interlinked a bit, and I guess what's funny is we haven't met in person since.
We have not, but we've been following each other on social media, and I think over the years, just like commenting or like sending personal DMs to different posts that we each make, or a story on Instagram. So we haven't met since that event, but we've certainly sort of been in loose contact over the past few years due to the powers of social media.
Yeah, and much more so over the past sort of 4 or 5 months as we've been developing these projects. And it's been fantastic. I mean, first of all, it leads us to this first episode of the New Action Pod, and and very exciting. And I think it's really what it does speak to is the beauty of and the importance of networking. And and when you were sort of discussing your attendance at this conference and sort of working with other people from different groups and whatnot, it kind of actually made me a little bit I don't want to say jealous, but definitely a little bit it helped me to recognize, or just sort of re-emphasize the importance of networking and how important making those kinds of connections can be. And I'm sure you can really speak to that. I'm sure a lot of things that you've been working on have been as a result of strong networking. What comes next?
So I think, we're trying something new, literally, the New Action Pod. You know, we're going to be having guests join us who are going to be talking about issues that they care about and issues that citizens and people in Canada and around the world care about. And hopefully we can, you know, we can have conversations that enlighten our listeners and our viewers, and you know, we share information that leads to their growth and development and ways to take action online.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think I think it's going to be a very interesting experience, and I think that you know, one of the things that I appreciated that my co-founder and my co-founder Sam and I took in terms of our attitude towards when we developed Nouvelle was kind of, you know, trying to keep an open mind and recognizing that when you're trying new things, you don't want to limit the sort of opportunities of your project too much at the beginning, especially when you don't know, you know, too much about it. And it's going to be fascinating. You know, we develop, you know, ideas for new episodes and stories to talk about and topics to discuss and interviews to be had. It's going to be interesting to see sort of the shape of the narrative to a certain extent. You know, but I think that there's, you know, there's a huge variety of things that I think you and I are going to be interested to follow it. And I think that what that really makes is an interesting podcast. You know, something that isn't necessarily tied down and you know, if you're a young person, a millennial, Gen Z, you know, I think that our goal is just gonna, you know, be to make every week or every new episode, you know, something worthwhile for a variety of different reasons, but also something that encourages a sense of you know, solidarity and growth amongst young Canadians and young citizens around the world, to do what they can to take up action, to take up arms in solidarity and in demonstration, you know, to push for yeah, just a better, connected, more wholesome, more beautiful world.
Oh, that was so good. I couldn't have said it better. I literally didn't say it better, so kudos. All
cool,
right.
Alfred. You're not going to say subscribe to our YouTube channel, are you?
I was not planning on saying that. But
okay.
On this episode, we shared with you a little bit about who we are and how we got to know each other and why we are launching the New Action podcast. We hope you tune in. We hope you share this with your friends. And don't forget to follow us on social media.
when we actually get around to making the social media pages.
Right.
Oh my God, there's so much. We need logos. We need to even have a logo. Just have like it should be the we talked about, it was a very self-centered episode. Honestly, I hope that the audience doesn't get a sense that we're going to be, this is going to be a whole story of just like our lives. We just weren't proactive enough to plan anything to talk about outside of just us. No. This is all fantastic. There's no right way to record a first episode of a podcast. In this case, the New Action podcast. Today, in which we talk about in our first episode who we are, what we care about, what we plan to do with this beautiful platform, and why by the end of the podcast we'll have convinced you to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts.